Into a Friday morning here on WDLB, and the third Friday of the month, and that would mean that we would have a visit from County Board Chair Lance Plimmel. However, he sent in the troops here for me today. Joining me is, what district are you in the County Board?
I represent the 2nd District in the city of Marshfield.
Donna Rozar, your familiar voice here from the news on the state level. You're both Bond County and state. You're a busy girl.
I am. You'd be surprised how many state legislators hold local office. One of our legislators is the mayor of Dodgeville. We have several state legislators that are on their school boards, and we have at least 3 legislators who also serve on their county boards, and I think there are a couple that are on their city councils.
Do the meetings preclude one from the other attendance?
Well, you know, WebEx has helped a lot. I have chaired meetings from my Capitol office in Madison. So that has really helped. Now, Scott Krug, who represents the southern part of Wood County as a state representative, he just got elected to the Adams County County Board. So he's a little closer than I am, you know, being in Adams County. But it's really nice because Wisconsin Rapids is on the way to Madison. So there are numerous times when I will go to a county meeting in Wisconsin Rapids and then proceed on to Madison.
Where do you stand in your legislative session? Are you dismissed now?
We are dismissed. We have been dismissed. The only time that we would have a legislative session is if an extraordinary session were to be called, and leadership would have to be involved in that, or the governor.
Talking with Donna Rozar here at the Wood County Board Day today on this third Friday of the month on WDLB. The funding, as I talked with Lance, generally rolls downhill anyway, so you can kind of see what's coming there.
Yes.
Do you have any inside tracks? Does that help at all?
Well, it does help because I have that connection between the county. I don't know whether you know, and I'm sure you do, that the county is simply an arm of the state. I mean, we don't do anything without the state's permission. And a lot of our funding is passed through from the federal government to the state. So it was really good to have that background in county government and then be elected to the state legislature. And I'm just going to give you 2 examples. I'm a nurse. You know, I've been a cardiac nurse for many, many years, just retired in December of 2020. As a cardiac nurse, I saw multiple times when people with poor dental hygiene would come to my floor and have to be put on IV antibiotics because of a condition we call endocarditis. The endocardium is one of the layers of the heart, and bacteria in the mouth settles in the endocardium and causes endocarditis, which is an inflammation of the endocardium. And I saw some deaths because of this. We had a guy in his 40s from Northern Virginia who had some teeth that probably needed to be extracted in a dentist's office, but he owned a salvage yard, and he just went into his garage and he pulled those teeth with a vice pliers, and he got a horrible infection and ended up dying. And so I made the point in Madison that we needed an increased reimbursement rate for dental care for people on Badger Care, and I was successful in doing that. And I remember one of the staff members for the co-chair of the Joint Finance Committee said, nobody's ever articulated why it was important that we invest in dental care before. So I've been able to use my nursing background with my county board because we've had a Healthy Smiles program in the Wood County Health Department for a really long time. And so I knew of the need for increased reimbursement because we were having a hard time getting elementary school kids seen by dentists because they weren't accepting Badger Care. So that gave me that background. The second example I'd like to tell you is that you know that Wood County owns 2 nursing homes. We own Edgewater Haven in Port Edwards, and we have a nursing home unit at Norwood for the elderly, chronically mentally ill individuals. So because I've been involved in the Health and Human Services Committee for so long, I know the need for increased nursing home reimbursements because we need to take care of vulnerable and elderly fragile populations. So I went before the Joint Finance Committee co-chairs and fought for increased reimbursement for our nursing homes. So they're just two examples of how I was able to use my experience and my knowledge at the county level for the benefit of counties. And it didn't only benefit Wood County, it benefited counties across the state. So, and Badger Care recipients across the state. So that was kind of exciting to participate in those policy decisions.
Some of the funding that's come down here since the pandemic has kind of bypassed the state, though, and gone to the counties, as I recall. There were some people in Madison who said, we need to be able to disperse it from here. What do you think?
Well, I'm all for local control. You know I am. But the fact is that the governor had complete control over a chunk of money, millions of dollars. And the legislature tried to direct some of that money. All those bills were vetoed, and it was very disappointing because we, who are local representatives, felt that we kind of knew what was needed at the county and local level, and so we tried to make suggestions on how he spends some of that money. And he actually did do some of that money, but not because we passed a bill about it, but he just did it on his own. But I'm all for local control. And did that answer your question? Maybe I didn't understand.
Well, I guess
exactly.
you did, because you said that it was routed through the governor rather than the legislature when it comes down for a lot of this from the pandemic money that's been coming down.
Yes.
How long can that spigot last?
Well, the spigot's not going to last long, and we better absolutely be prepared for the fact when that spigot turns off, because there's no money tree behind the White House or behind the state capitol or behind the Wood County Courthouse. And so this money that we are spending like drunken sailors before the ink even dries on what's been printed has some pretty significant long-term implications. And that's why in Wood County, we got $14.1 million in Wood County, as I'm sure Lance has told you. And we are trying to be very strategic about how we spend that money because we don't want to start a new program that's going to necessitate ongoing funding. We'd like to use it like for HVAC projects or generational projects that are going to last a while. But that goes to the projected surplus that we may have at the state level of around $13 million, $13.8 million, I think is the amount I heard. And it's going to be very strategic of how we spend that, because I think we've got some challenges coming in the future, and we want to put some of that money into long-term tax relief, and as well as fully funding our rainy day fund, because if we get into some trouble, we'd like some emergency funds to pay payroll and maintain some of our services. But no, the spigot is going to turn off, and I think we are suffering from inflation because of this crazy spending that we're doing, and there's just so many things we could talk about that. But yeah, the spigot's going to turn off, and then we better have some alternate plans.
There was a time, talking with Donna Rozar, you can too, 384-2192, live here on WDLB. You may be watching us on MFLD TV through the city communication channels there, 989 on your Spectrum digital tier, or you could be watching us online as well. You can access there or through Roku or other devices streaming from their sites. The money that has come down was at one time thought that we were doing a jail project at the time. And we thought,
there are two different sources of funding.
That's one of the things people said, well, why don't you just take what you're getting here and then we could wipe out this debt that we're going to have? No. Sometimes debt is good.
Yes, and we've been very responsible at the county level for spending debt, for incurring debt. We're way below our debt. We could go much higher with debt, and we have felt that would be fiscally irresponsible to do that. We bonded $58 million for this new jail. And the overruns have been pretty significant. So we are going to have to talk about how we're going to pay for that overrun. We may have to use some of the ARPA dollars. We need to talk about what makes sense, okay? The decision to build the jail, and I'll just tell you why I voted for it, is because we don't have any programming space in our current jail. There is not a lot of space for helping incarcerated individuals get their HSEDs, for helping to do alcohol and drug addiction treatment, having faith groups come in and do Bible studies and do things like that. There's just wasn't enough space to help these incarcerated individuals to finish their time in our Wood County Jail and move toward being productive contributing members of society. It was also costing us a lot. A lot of our infrastructure in that county jail was under concrete, and when something would break down, we'd have to dig up concrete to get to pipes, and our kitchen was inadequate. I mean, there were a lot of reasons. We were shipping a lot of prisoners to other counties. That was costing us a lot of money. And Supervisor Wallenstein, who chaired the jail ad hoc committee, she and her ad hoc committee did a marvelous job with putting a PowerPoint presentation together that's still available to the public, looking at the cost-benefit analysis. And so it just made sense to build a new jail. And so this overrun that we're incurring now with this, we don't want to decrease the footprint of the jail because that would decrease the programming space, and it would also necessitate us transporting prisoners again to other counties. So we've got to look at some things to fund now this overrun of the jail.
Just news story yesterday, Joe Parisi from Dane County, they're building a jail down there, and they voted already to have a $10 million because of a construction overrun, and now they come back to yesterday and said we need $16 million more. I mean, it's just to the point where the costs were well under what the inflation has driven this. Yeah. And now you're into it. You can't stop.
No.
I mean, as you said, it's still a good idea.
Absolutely.
The cost has gone up considerably, but this is one of those many times in government where you pay me now or pay me later.
Yep.
We fix the bridge now. We kick the can down the road and say, no, now it's 16 instead of 10 million. Now we're going to pay for that because it still needs to be fixed. This was a situation, as you've described it, that needed to be addressed because it was put off a decade ago.
Well, actually 2 decades ago, because when I got elected to the county board, one of the first votes I took in 2000 was whether to fund a new jail or not. So we're talking about 22 years ago this issue came up, and then we've continued to talk about this need, but it really got to a crisis situation where the ad hoc committee was formed, and then they did just a marvelous job of presenting both to the communities and to the county board of the need.
And you focused in on this word, they call it programming, and I've had Adam Fisher and Lance in here, and I said, describe that. Well, you described it as things that you meet the problem of the people that are incarcerated with their lives by trying to change it around. You know, in the Dust Bowl days of the Cowboys, we just put them in there because we kept them out of society for a while because they were a menace. Over the years, we've realized that there keeps coming back. We talk about shootings and mass shootings, and we talk about if you can't control the guns, you got to have mental health. Well, what does that mean? That's a long game there, mental health. So it starts where the rubber meets the road at the county levels with these people who are now going to either change their lives or become habitual or repeat offenders at some point in time. You keep seeing the same people, even their sons and daughters. Because of the lives that they've had, sometimes they keep coming back into the situation. And so that's where the government, where society today has decided that they're going to start at the bottom rung here and say, okay, we've got to change some things if we're going to keep things from getting to the point now where we are. Look at Milwaukee with shootings over the weekend. These other people over the weekend in California, you know, and you can sit there and go, I don't get it. Taiwanese on Taiwanese, you know, you got a beef somewhere along the line here. Right. So we need to be able to get to people at the time when they first start out here and play the long game, and that's kind of what we're doing here by these projects. So when people see these big numbers, it's pay me now or pay me later, because we've kicked the can down the road, and look at what's happened in society here.
And the unfortunate thing is intervention is having to occur at an earlier and earlier age. And our Wood County Human Services Department is trying to nip some of that in the bud. But you are absolutely right. The root causes do need to be addressed. And government cannot do it all by themselves. It has to be a public partner collaboration in addressing some of these issues. Are you familiar with the Joseph's Project? It's a project that they have in Wausau, and I was just there last night helping with mock interviews. But the Joseph's Project is a faith-based project where they have incarcerated individuals apply to their program, and then they go through this program. Last night was graduation, and then they are interviewing today with a lot of the places that need employment in Wausau. So I went yesterday and participated in the mock interviews to help these individuals learn how to interview. And last night, 10 people graduated from this program, and they are I'm just trying to think. There was one individual who is now a felon because they got 5 DUIs, and I don't know if you know the law, but after 5 DUIs, you're labeled a felon and you do some time. And another individual just made some this is a second chance for them. And the workforce development issues that we have in this country. We need bodies. And I see this programming at the Wood County Jail as being able to help individuals enter the workforce productively and be contributing instead of taking from society. We're trying to do some things at the state level also to help incarcerated individuals become part of the workforce. So it's going to take a coordinated effort to treat those root causes and then to help individuals enter the workforce, to not take, to give.
Talking with Donna Rozar. You can too. 384-2192. We're live here on WDLB this second Friday of the month as we visit with people from the county board. She is our Marshfield representative on Wood County Board, and also at the state level as well, has a unique perspective here in giving us a look at what's coming our way. I talked with Lance about this, and I'd like to get your thoughts. In the pandemic, county was kind of up until then, not a lot of people know your stamp on it. I mean, you realize how much comes through and where the funnels and everything are. But when health department came up, suddenly they were in the forefront of it. They have that power? Yeah, they do. And people didn't realize it. And I said yesterday that even when they were in an advisory stage, like, say, for instance, the fair here, they would go and ask them, and they'd say, no, I don't think you should. Right. And they said, okay, if we don't go against that advice, what is our insurance going to do? And what about people who get sick and now they're going to come back and we're going to have a problem, and they're going to point back and say, you went against the advice of these people. So sometimes they can shut you down with things like health inspections. People that weren't in the business didn't realize that they have the ability to do that. But when the pandemic came around, they realized that they have a lot of influence and power in that area. And a lot of people like yourself were getting calls saying, can't you do something about this? And it's like, should we? I would imagine at some point you think to yourself, well, maybe there's a reason why the structure is set up this way. What are your thoughts on how things went down over the past couple of years?
Well, I've been a long-term chair of the Health and Human Services Committee in Wood County, and so I was involved in all of those discussions. My kudos to our health officer, Sue Comferman-Smith. She did a marvelous job with helping businesses make decisions, with carrying out mandates that were being handed down both from the federal government and from Governor Evers' office. And she and her staff deserve the utmost credit for working long hours under very difficult, challenging situations at times. My take on it is, I never was in favor of mandatory masks. There were people that were pushing for the Health and Human Services Committee to mandate masks, for Sue to mandate masks, for the county board to mandate masks. I think that we had a very common sense approach. We certainly obeyed the executive orders when they came down, but there were some health officers who really ruled with an iron hand, well, let's call it an iron fist, over some of those. The Dane County health officer just absolutely squashed things. I got kicked out of an Uber the other day because, things were good, and no, I'm sorry, you can't ride in my Uber because you don't have a mask. And I said, I threw my masks away 6 months ago. And so I had to walk because I could not ride in the Uber. But Dane County stayed locked down a whole lot longer than the rest of us. And part of that was because the health officer in Dane County really exercised her authority to the max. We did not do that in Wood County. Sue tried to do it with education, with common sense, with reasonableness, and she gave her recommendations as the health officer when they were needed to be done. But she also worked with individuals to institute reasonable mitigation efforts as things started slowing down. And I just was very upset by some of the things that happened nationally and statewide, but I truly believe that as a county, our county health officer acted reasonably with common sense and still safely.
Regardless of the fact that it's coming back in some spots here, that they're getting more cases now, the county health department has always continued their vaccination program around the area and made it available to people. As a funding arm, though, from the board, how much have you had to absorb in their department? Much, if anything?
No, that's all come from federal dollars. The federal passed through the state has funded all of those, and you can still get free vaccines, and that's all come from entities other than the county.
Talking with Donna Rozar. You can too, 384-2192 on today's Insight program, this second Friday of the month. You know that if you're listening live, but you may be watching us in video here on MFLD TV. You can watch it through your Spectrum Digital tier, or you can log on to their online sites, mfldtv.com, or you can watch it on your Roku, Fire Sticks, and things like that, streaming as well. We'll talk more. You can too, 384-2192 on today's Insight program. WDLB's Insight program here on the merry month of May, the third Friday in the month. I'm thinking here, we only have 4 this month. Otherwise, we have 5, and then I've got to find an extra guest on a Friday somewhere. But this month, we've got 4. On the third Friday, we talk about County Board. Lance Plimmel would normally be in here, and this time he has graciously, or maybe I guess you have graciously decided that you would appear in his place here on the Insight program to allow us to talk to you. Donna Rozar, representing Northwood County on the county board. A lot of talk, especially since 2020, and I suppose, again, this is on the state level, but we're still in a 2020 presidential election look back. There are people who are running. Your party behind closed doors has got to be a real free-for-all some days, because you got Ramthan on one, and now and Nicholson and Michaels are trying to make hay on that. You had the Voss now today with the you're not releasing, because the left is going to come after and they want to see what you're doing, so they act open records laws, and they're not producing them to their liking, the judge's liking, so on and on we go here with a taxpayer-funded investigation that should have wrapped up long ago, and they're saying that it was because all of this roadblocks that are being thrown in and all this unnecessary business that's going on. But election integrity on the county level. Again, we just talked about health department. As far as I know, Trent and here in town, Deb are doing the best they can, with what they've got. And the advisories, mistakes have been made years. You were elected how many times, it was all good until it wasn't. It seems like to me now
Well, this was a conversation in 2016. You remember there were some allegations of election fraud then, all the way back in 2016. It really came to a head in 2020. I'm on the Assembly Campaigns and Elections Committee. Have I ever gotten a trial by fire in my first term as a state legislator? I thank God every day I am not in a leadership position, and there are days that you're right, I just sit back and watch. In our caucus, you're right, the fireworks go sometimes, and it has been a very interesting process to observe. My take on what happened in 2020, and I am not in favor of decertifying electors. I have ambivalent feelings about whether the Wisconsin Election Commission should be abolished. I think that that's a work in progress. I had a long conversation with Megan Wolf the other day, who is the administrator of WEC, and that was a very interesting conversation. She's always very open to ask for me, answering questions that we have. I have listened to testimony that Representative Branchen has brought before our committee. I think I've asked some good questions, and we have passed some election reform bills that have addressed a lot of the bullet points that people came to our committee and said, this is a problem and this is a problem. Hey, we passed a bill to address that, and it was vetoed by the governor. So, we've gone that way. I've thought about this a lot. And my take, in part, if not in total, but we don't have 2 hours to talk about this, but my take in part was that it was absolutely wrong for Mark Zuckerberg to send $8.1 million into our state to influence our election. It was wrong. We passed a bill to prevent that kind of thing from happening again. The bill was vetoed. There is a reason he targeted Green Bay, Milwaukee, Madison, Kenosha, and Racine, because that money put forth a huge get-out-the-vote effort with Democratic voters. They could find them there. There is no doubt in my mind that there are enough ballots with Biden's name checked that showed that he won. It concerns me how some of those ballots were obtained, and we tried to address some of those things. The drop boxes, unsecured, I have no problems. Deb Hall had this little box that you could slip your absentee ballot into. It had a camera on it. They picked that up every day. I have no problem with secured boxes like that people can drop in. Absentee ballots should absolutely be available. I worked in the town of Hiles at the last meet. I worked from 6:30 in the morning till after 9 o'clock at night because Trent needed somebody in the town of Hiles, so I drove down and helped on that day. I needed to vote by absentee ballot because I was not in town that day. This indefinitely confined status was totally and absolutely abused during the November 2020 elections. And if you don't know what indefinitely confined ballots are, there's a state statute that allows people that are indefinitely confined, people in nursing homes, people with spinal cord injuries, they can apply for indefinitely confined status without showing an ID. They don't have to show a voter ID. And that went up exponentially during the November 2020 election. Now, I think a lot of the clerks have cleaned up those. And we had a person that was running for state legislature who voted by indefinitely confined and was out knocking on doors every day for the election. That was such an abuse. And there is no doubt that weaknesses in our election laws were exploited, partly because of the pandemic, because all of that fear and everything of going to the polls, and I hope we never go that way again. But we tried to tighten up those laws, and all of those were vetoed by the governor. So people need to know that the state legislature did do what they could to close some of those loopholes.
You use the term tighten up the laws, and other people use the term disenfranchising voters because it makes it more difficult for people who are confined or handicapped to do those kind of things.
I can tell you that I would never support legislation that disenfranchised one voter. I have said this numerous times. My goal is to make it as easy as possible for every eligible voter to vote, and as hard as the dickens to make it possible to cheat. And that's a fine balance, isn't it? Because people that want to cheat are going to absolutely try every little thing to cheat. But we never should disenfranchise any eligible voter from voting.
That's where, and they'll, as you know, bring in extremes, and they'll say Granny over here is 93 and she can't get there to get a proper ID, and she can't do the things that she needs to do.
If she's indefinitely confined, she does not need an ID.
So they'll bring in fringe cases here in order to make that the mainstream for not voting or voting for something from time to time. And, that's got to be frustrating because, as I've said so many times on this program, the pendulum swings and only spends a split second at each side. We live in the middle, and people don't want to admit that because the loudest voices are out on these ends.
Very vocal.
But it's in the middle that we all seem to need to meet here on these issues. And it's difficult because where you're at, you're hearing people who are on both ends, and they love to, and we're in a re-election cycle now. The word radical is thrown around because that makes it sound like they're disenfranchising their opinion.
Yep. Sensationalizes the issue. And doesn't sensationalism sell?
It does. It's what, and we talked about this in the beginning of the program. I said without that, you don't get voters to turn out. You got to have a ball to throw around here in order to play the game. Without any ball in the game, you got to make it that way. Talking with Donna Rozar here about the issues in front of the county and state, as well as we talked earlier in the program here. Things kind of roll downhill with that, and we talked about how she got involved in both and pointed out the ways that it is of benefit to be seeing things coming our way for Wood County as a representative and knowing what's happening in the levels. We have, it seems like, plenty of money. I don't know where it's coming from, but even as someone who enjoys the benefits of everything that the money brings, I think to myself sometimes this is. And tax reform is one of those things where we seldom talk about because we're floating around in the money here and enjoying all the things bridges that are being fixed and infrastructure and all the things that it's buying. But at some point in time here, we're going to have to start wondering whose pocket it's coming out of, and it can't help but go up.
Well, income has been up. And with our income tax, we flattened the income tax rates a little bit last year. In the last budget, we went from 4 income brackets down to 3 income brackets. So people were able to keep a little bit more of their money. We kept the top income bracket at the same, but we collapsed the bottom 3 brackets. We'd like to move to a flat tax. I know that we could have a big discussion about the benefits or the cons of a flat tax, but there are people in Madison who would like to see some real tax reform package come forward. We really rely a lot on property taxes in this state. Property tax is a very regressive tax. And I've always been a consumption tax person. So one of the things that's being floated is maybe we go up a little bit on sales tax. We get rid of these billions of dollars of exemptions that we have out there for sales taxes and bring our reliance down some on the property tax. So there's a lot of discussion about a tax reform package that hopefully will move forward. There are people that would like to see us get rid of income tax altogether in the state of Wisconsin, and there are efforts in that direction because we're losing a lot of people in Wisconsin, and people think that getting rid of the income tax would retain residents. And so there's a big discussion about whether to continue with income tax. The other thing is property tax. I think we made some gains in eliminating property tax. A personal property tax this year. Businesses have always hated personal property tax. So there's a lot of discussion about tax reform, and I'm not a tax and spend person, and you don't know how sick it makes me to have this money just come in and the spigot's going to turn off. It's just got such negative long-term ramifications economically, and we better be prepared to hit a little bit of rock bottom, and I hope it's not too bloody when we do.
Having lived in New Hampshire, I went, "Where's my state tax book?" They said, "We don't have one." I said, "What?" Having been born and raised here, it was state and federal tax booklet at the end of the year when we were growing up, and they didn't have one. But there's downsides to that because then it comes on property. Register a car there. Register your boat there. You know, properties, how much that is. I mean, it's got to come from somewhere. You can shuffle it around, but property tax lowering or tax lowering means something's going to have to get cut. And
you're going to have to make up the revenue somewhere else.
Or make it up, right? You know, so, I mean, I was not in favor of their roads there. You know,
were they not
They're
in
not
repair?
good. No, and they have frost like we do, not quite as heavy, and we're not quite on the same longitude there, but that I said, I get it now. When I came back here, we've complained since I've been a little kid about how high the tax rates are, and when it comes out, we're not number one. We're barely, maybe even in the top 10 floating around on tax rates. But what we get when people come here, they say, well, this is really nice here. I said, well, you got to pay for it.
Right. This is a state that has expected a lot of services over the years. And you're right. They are not free, and somebody has to pay for them. We have to find the balance between what we're willing to finance and how high we want taxes to go. Yep.
Talking with Donna Rozar here on this third Friday of the month. You know that if you're listening live, you can join in 384-2192, 384-2192. You may be watching us on video here. And again, some of the things that we talk about, I always say, well, you're watching us in who knows how all the things we talked about are probably solved by now. I don't. We'd like to.
Redistricting is solved, and that's something.
We'll talk about that here in just a moment, coming up on today's program. So stay tuned. WDLB's Insight program here this third Friday of the month, and talking county board, county business with normally Lance Plimmel, but he sent in the good surrogate here. Donna Rozar is talking with us this morning because I can talk to her about state and county business. County usually isn't that busy, but there's always something going on at the state, especially this time of the year, with marches going on, and Roe v. Wade is now big news. Before anything even happens, they're firebombing offices. It's just not an opinion. We're not even into anything yet, and both sides. I mean, I try to stay away from that subject at a cocktail party, like there's no changing minds here. It doesn't seem like there's not a lot of discussion to be had. You either believe this or you believe that, and so I don't know where you go with something like this.
Well, Jeff, there was a reason that was leaked, and my heart just goes out to the Supreme Court because I believe that has been an institution where there has been trust between members, and this leak to me was just unconscionable. But it was politically motivated, it was coordinated, and it was done for a purpose, and that just makes me sad. Now, one thing I'd like to say about this decision, and that was a draft. The final ruling has not come out. I expect it'll come out next month sometime. And people think it's going to outlaw abortion across the country, and that is not going to happen. If Roe versus Wade is overturned by the Supreme Court, the issue just goes back to each individual state. And would you not rather have it decided by the state legislators than 9 men in black robes in Washington, D.C.? That just absolutely seems not democratic to me. And people need to understand that they will have a chance then to discuss the issue in the state, not have to go to to Washington to do this. So this is where I see it unfolding. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, you know that Wisconsin has a state statute from 1849 that criminalizes abortion. Been in place for a long time. There have been attempts to decriminalize abortion. They have not succeeded. So I believe that state statute will be discussed. 71% of the people in a poll I just saw recently want some limitations on abortion. They don't want abortion up until the day the baby's born or the night before the baby's born. They don't want people to make a decision about whether to have an abortion because they have a boy and they wanted a girl. They don't want to be able to have people abort babies just because they have a congenital abnormality. Some of what is being done is downright gruesome. And if you talk to people about that and you explain partial birth abortions and you explain dismembering babies with late-term abortions, people go, ooh, we don't want that. So there's going to be a discussion. What limitations does Wisconsin want on abortion? Maybe it'll be at the time that you can detect a heartbeat at 8 to 12 weeks. Maybe it'll be 15 weeks. I personally believe that life begins at conception. But I will discuss limitations with people because I'm a reasonable person, okay? And if the people say, we don't want an abortion after 12 to 15 weeks, we don't want an abortion except for life of the mother, rape, or incest, I'm not going to be happy with that because I believe that's a life. But if you know anything about the Bible, remember when the Israelites demanded a king and God said, well, haven't I been doing pretty well up until now? Why do you want a king? We want a king, just like the other nations do. God said, I'll give you a king. Well, you know how well that worked out for the Israelites. They had a whole lot of problems. So sometimes you get what you want, even though it's not what we all think is the best. So I would just appeal to people's common sense and peaceful protests. Let's have the discussion. Let's not firebomb people's offices and do things like that. How violent and destructive that is, just like the violence and destructiveness that happens with unborn babies with abortion.
The other states, Texas, some of these others, Tennessee, other places, Oklahoma just today, all those are templates, I think, for a lot of people to say we do or don't want that situation. But once you've got them in place, now we can bring that in here. It would be easy to take their language and just implement it here.
Well, you know I sponsored the heartbeat bill in the state assembly. Being a pro-life individual, I felt very strongly that we ought to have the conversation. Couldn't even get it out of caucus in my own caucus. So I was the assembly author, and there was a state senator, Julian Bradley, who was my Senate lead. We got a hearing in the Senate committee, and it was voted out of the Senate committee, but it never got voted on by both floors. We had a representative from Texas come up and testify in favor of our heartbeat bill, which was very much fashioned after the Texas heartbeat bill. Never got traction. But those conversations need to happen, and I can't for the life of me understand why people don't want that conversation in each of their states instead of being dictated from
Well,
Washington.
what happened, though, there is that you have maybe intended or unintended consequence where you're pitting people against people by saying this is when it's going to happen, and now you're making citizen police out of other people, turning in other people for law breaking, and that doesn't seem to be a winning situation either.
The conversation has to take place. And I'm afraid that the conversation is not going to be civil discourse. And I think we're prepared for it at the state level. And I understand what you are saying.
Let's grab your headphones
okay.
there. Let's go to the phone. Good morning. You're on the Insight program.
Yeah, hi. I've been listening to Ms. Rozar for the last several minutes. And she has been full of misinformation as regarding the abortion issue. And I will just point out the one thing and then I'll hang up. But partial birth abortion has been outlawed since the Bush #2 has been in office. So maybe she should get her facts straight before she starts spouting off. And I'll hang up.
All right.
So she is right that in some states partial birth abortion has been outlawed, but partial birth abortions still do take place in some states.
Talking with Representative Donna Rozar here of County Board Day today, but this is one of those that we talked off mic. I said it's like people bring this up even with the sheriff's race. It's like, lady, that's nothing to do with anything I can do. But we know about people. This has been an issue that people have voted or determined who they're going to vote for on character issue. It's gone to the point where it's now not even about necessarily the issue at hand, but are you a good or a bad person, depending upon, and
what your belief system is.
And when you have that, that's real hard to move. Compromise is hard to find when you're entrenched like that.
I think people see in part their belief about this issue as maybe a character issue, and so that's what you're getting at when people ask. I mean, as a state legislator, if this issue is returned to the state, I will be involved in the discussion. So it's pretty, I won't as a county board supervisor because county board supervisors don't talk about this issue, but as a state legislator, I will be involved in that discussion, and it is going to be a conversation that it will be interesting.
Let's leave it at that.
Yes.
So, how did your cheese bill come out?
Oh, my Kobe cheese bill. Well, it did not get a vote in either the state Senate or the state assembly, but we had a lot of fun with it. Okay.
Refresh people.
So when Bob Culp was the legislator, he and Kathy Bernier, Bob Culp was my predecessor, and somebody wrote to Kathy Bernier about making Colby cheese the state cheese. And Bob Culp jumped on board with Senator Bernier, and they introduced a bill. And it kind of got some attention in the Assembly, and then COVID came, and the Senate never took it up. So when I got elected, I thought, well, I'm going to pick up Representative Culp's bill just to honor him for what he did. So we introduced a Colby cheese bill. Both Senator Bernier and I did it again. We got hearings in the state Senate and the state Assembly. It never got voted out of my committee. I think it got voted out of Senator Bernier's committee, but we got a lot of publicity out of that. Some wonderful stories were done on Colby cheese and the history of Colby cheese, and we won't review that right now. But Colby cheese, was made in Colby and named after the village, the city up there that we've got in my district. And and I don't know that the cheesemakers are not in favor of it, but it was fun. It was fun. We marched in the Colby parade, the Colby cheese parade, with a big sign on my red Corvette that I have that said Colby cheese, and we had a lot of fun with it.
I guess I wanted to kind of end on that because of all this serious and talk and that we do here about issues that you can't move people on. Sometimes you just got to lighten it up a little bit and
Yes.
do some fun things.
And we
once in a
did
while.
some fun. People were disappointed that we didn't bring Colby cheese to our hearings, but I've served Colby cheese and crackers multiple times in my office, and we've invited the other legislators to come in for Colby cheese, and we'll always promote Colby cheese. But I think if that had gotten traction, Colby cheese would have lifted all cheeses. Because if you go to the store to buy Colby cheese, I'd like to introduce you to this Gouda or whatever. But yeah, I don't believe that will ever happen. Senator Jacques, who I don't know whether you know him, but he's from Green Bay, and he would like to see the ice cream sundae named as the dessert for Wisconsin. So he called me one day and he said, "Now, Donna, I'll support your Colby cheese bill if you'll let me amend your bill to make ice cream sundaes the Wisconsin dessert." And then he sang me 6 verses of this song that somebody had written about the ice cream sundae, and it's like, you have got to be kidding me. This is part of being a state legislator.
I guess so.
It was so funny.
Put that at Badger Boys State. There's the kind of bills you really have fun with.
No, it was just a hoot, yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate very much you coming on and availing yourself to us here on the
I was
Insight
glad
program.
Lance asked and was pleased to do it.
Donna Rozar, my guest here on this third Friday of the month on the Insight program on WDLB. You may be watching us in video on Marshfield TV, MFLD TV, award-winning, I may add, here on 989 or online. I'm Jeff Cannon.